Hi there, this is Unmesh from PiXimperfect. I hope you're having a great day, and if not, I'm sure you are doing your best to make it an awesome one. A couple months ago, Photoshop really rocked the cradle by announcing a feature called the depth blur. It is Photoshop's way of adding a shallow depth of field effect to their photos. However, I have to admit, the cradle broke a little. If you want to check out how, watch this video later. But now, Luminar announced their new feature and they're calling it the Bokeh AI, which is kind of the same thing, slightly different. But since it has bokeh in the name, what we really want to know is whether it can simulate the creamy bokeh of a 200mm f2 lens without selling both the kidneys. I don't know what is happening with both of these companies' headquarters. Maybe they're playing top trumps because first, Luminar came up with automatic sky replacement. Photoshop followed with the same feature. Then Photoshop rolled out depth blur. Now Luminar has come up with Bokeh AI. Either way, all to the consumer's advantage, and I love this healthy competition. I'm sure it's all in good fun. In this video, we're going to put both of these technologies head to head and find out where each of these falls short or has the edge. There's going to be situations where Photoshop wins and there are times when Luminar has the edge. But the question really is, if you can do everything with Photoshop, is Luminar even worth it as an accompaniment? Let's find out. So without any further ado, let's get started. Back in the magical world of Photoshop and Luminar, and if you're interested in any of these programs, both Photoshop and Luminar are linked up in the description. There might be some discounts, so keep an eye out for that as well. First of all, let's look at the general quality of bokeh in default settings. So here we are in Luminar AI, and all we have to do is to scroll down to the portrait section, and the very first adjustment here is portrait bokeh AI. So let's click on that and increase it all the way to the right hand side. Let's see how much time does it take. Done. Done. It's that fast. Now let's do the same thing in Photoshop and compare. So in Photoshop, we need to go to filter and then neural filters, and in here simply turn on depth blur, and by default depth blur is set at 75%. So as I speak, it is processing. Let's see how much time does it take. I'm not going to fast forward the video. It is the way it is. Now what's happening is it's sending the photo to Photoshop's cloud to Adobe over the internet, and then it's processing there on the internet and bringing it back, and this is what we get. Now you be the judge, you decide which one is better. So this, my friend, is Photoshop. If you just zoom in, have a look at how the blur starts. It is just so abrupt, not at all realistic. It's not even a competition. Have a look at what Luminar does. Just zoom in. I'm not being one-sided, just look for yourself. So have a look how smooth and natural the blur is. And if you just look down over here, look how gradual the blur is. Now if you hover over it, there's a mask. You can adjust the mask later. We're going to come to that, but for now, let's just compare the overall quality. This is Luminar, and this, my friend, is Photoshop. And here's both of them side by side so that you can zoom in and compare for yourself. The next feature that we're going to compare is connectivity. You might ask, Unmesh, how is that even a topic? Well, it is because Photoshop's neural filters, many of them, require for you to have an internet connection to work. However, Luminar is completely offline. So once you install the software, it doesn't require for you to be connected to the internet all the time. So if you're using filters like Smart Portrait or Depth Blur, you would notice that at the top, it is written over there. This filter processes image data in the cloud. So every time you move a single slider, it's going to send that data to Photoshop server, and then it will be processed over there and get back to you. So if I turn on Depth Blur, you would notice that this circle is going on. It just means that it is just sending it to Photoshop servers, it's processing over there and bringing the image back to you. To be transparent, I just fast forwarded a little so that you don't have to wait. Now at this time, even if you move any slider slightly to the right or left, it will again send the data to Photoshop servers. You have to wait for it to be processed over there, wait for it to be downloaded again. It's pretty long. However, with Luminar, it is all offline. So if I go down there in Portrait Bokeh, and if I increase it, let's increase it all the way to the right hand side, it's just done instantly. And I promise there's no fast forwarding going on right over here. And at the moment, you can even stop watching the video. It's not even a comparison. So this is Luminar, and have a look at what Photoshop did. It even, maybe it's very intelligent. It wants to censor out the logo so that we don't have any trouble in publishing this photo for a video. So it's so intelligent that it's automatically censoring the brands. Now for the third example, we have a rather tricky image. And there's a reason for it. It's because we're going to compare speeds. You already know Luminar is a little faster than Photoshop, but how faster is it? Let's put a timer on it. So in this image, as you can clearly see, the background is very crowded, and we do need to blur the background to separate the subject from it. So here we are with Portrait Bokeh AI, and we're going to just increase the amount all the way to the right hand side. Now, let's see how much time does it take. There's a timer on at the corner of the screen and we can calculate with that. And it's already done. Now, the blur might not be that much, but you can adjust that by adjusting depth correction. So we want to bring the blur a little closer. As you can see, it's coming closer and it's happening instantaneously, by the way. And there you have it. Now, there's a problem with this. Hand is cut off. First of all, let's do the same thing in Photoshop and then we're going to get back to this and correct the hand. So here in Photoshop, let's simply turn on depth blur and start the timer. There you go. I might speed the overall video for your convenience, but the timer will also be sped. So keep that in mind. Well, there you have the result. Might not be what you wanted, but is there a way to adjust the focus? Maybe there is. So if I click on the focal point, so if I click on the subject and say to Photoshop, all right, I want this to be in focus. Let's click on that. Let's see if it improves the mask. There is a little bit of improvement, but it's just, well, I cannot recommend it, guys. I just cannot. Now let's get back to Luminar and let's see if we can get the hand back. Let's zoom in. And all you gotta do is, first of all, let's decrease the overall amount of portrait bokeh. So I'm gonna keep it at about 1 or 2 so that we can see the hand right over there. And I'm sure there might be some other better ways to do it, but I'm not aware of that. Anyway, so all you have to do is to choose what you want to do. If you want to bring the hand in focus, so select the focus tab. If you want to defocus something, click on defocus and paint over that. So if you want to focus, you can also change the softness of the brush and also the opacity right over here. So we're going to keep the opacity all the way high, softness a little less, and then just brush over the areas that you want to bring in focus. And there you go, my friend. We have the hand painted. Let's zoom out and see. We have not added the blur yet, so let's take it all the way to the right hand side and have a look. The hand is back. Now you, my friend, must be thinking, what is the point of even watching this video? Luminar is clearly winning right over here. Well, I'm going to give you 2 points. Number 1, you are my friend, so you are obligated to watch this video. Thank you so much. Number 2 is, there might be some areas where Photoshop is a little ahead. Let's talk about recognition. Now, at the moment of recording this video, Luminar only recognizes human portraits. No objects, no animals, nothing. Only human portraits. So if I click on Portrait Bokeh AI in Luminar with this dog photo, it's just all grayed out because it doesn't detect any human portrait. However, with Photoshop, that's not the case. If we turn on depth blur, it still works. It's still processing. And as usual, I might have to fast forward. But have a look. It detects that. So we have to respect Adobe for it. Now you might again notice that the blur just starts so very abruptly. Let's try adjusting the focal range. Let's see if it fixes that. Well, it doesn't. Let's try increasing it. Now keep in mind, every time I move anything, it's processing in the background. I'm just fast forwarding it, guys. Well, the blur is still abrupt. So yeah, it works. It does recognize other objects. So kudos to Adobe on recognition. The blur quality might not be great, but it works. And that's a big thing though. Adobe's depth blur also works on non-living things like cars. Let's see how it turns out on this one. So that is one of those areas where this kind of flexibility is just non-existent in Luminar. Now it is time for us to look at mask adjustment. Now you might ask, what do you mean by that? Well, we need to control which areas are going to be in focus and which areas are going to be blurred. Now, of course, this is automatic, but we do need some adjustments, right? Because AI doesn't always get it right. So here are the options in both of these software programs. So first of all, let's add a bokeh in this image. Let's increase it. Now the blur is pretty gradual. I'm just going to bring the depth correction a little bit to the left so that the blur starts early. Now let's zoom in and look at the mask. If you look at this side, the mask is seeping in too much. So if you take the edge correction to the left, the mask will come out a little. And if you take it to the right, see, it's getting more and more inside. So you can adjust the edge accordingly using this slider. I think the default was pretty good. So double click on edges correction. So it'll be set to default. And on top of that, definitely you can manually do it by simply putting things in focus just by painting right over there. Or if you want to defocus something, you already know that. Click on defocus and put that out of focus. So let's go to focus. Let's paint these areas. These were left out. There we go. And have a look. Such a great change. Now in here, if you look at it, there was some extra hair. If I turn it off, you would notice that it got left out. So let's try to bring it back. So with the focus tab selected, first of all, let's decrease the opacity. Make sure it's very, very soft. And then control the size of the brush and slowly and gradually paint over it. Try to bring back that area. See, it's slowly coming back. Keep painting over it. And there you go, my friend. We have the hair back. That was paying attention to the extremely little details which most people won't even notice. Now let's look at what options we have in Photoshop. Now I have already applied depth blur to save time. Now keep in mind, inside of depth blur adjustment in Photoshop, there is no option for you to adjust the mask or choose which areas are going to be in focus and which areas are going to be blurred if the masking is not proper. Now, of course, you can click on an area to choose which areas are going to be in focus, but then again, there is no option to correct it. Right now, I've clicked on the subject. It might come up with a better result. I'm not sure. We have to wait. So this is pretty good, my friend. It's not bad, but there is no way inside of this that we can adjust it. What we have to do is to scroll down and choose Output Depth Map Only. So here we have the depth map. Hit OK. So this generates the depth map, and based on that, we have to apply the blur again. So now you can simply decrease the opacity of the depth map, and if you want to correct something, what you have to do, first of all, let's increase the opacity to see what's there. Have a look. It has not selected the hair properly. So we would have to take the brush, hold the Alt key or the Option key, click to take a sample right over here, and then correct the depth map. So that's the only way to do it. So here, as you can see, it has selected a little extra. So we have to make sure that the depth map is proper. So this is not a proper mask, it's a depth map. As you can see, the resolution of the depth map is from the old ages of 1.3 megapixel cameras. Anyway, let's zoom out. Now, once you have corrected this, then you would have to create an alpha channel of this, and the way to do that is by going to channels, hold the controller command, click on the thumbnail of the RGB to create a selection based on the brightness, and then you might want to create a channel. This creates an alpha channel. Fill that with white, press Ctrl or Command D to deselect, click on the channels again, come back to layers, delete this, make a copy of the background layer, then go to filter, blur, and then lens blur. It should be right over here. And then choose the source as alpha 1 that we just created. And then you can click on an area which you want to focus. So we want to focus over here. So click on that. And by chance, if you didn't get the mask right, you would have to again go back, adjust the depth map, come back and apply the blur again, and check again. So that's what we have in Photoshop at the moment. To tell you the truth, it just kind of makes sense if you're in Photoshop to do it manually. It would be way faster and actually more accurate. There is one more area where Photoshop is a little more flexible than Luminar, and that is controlling where to focus. Take a look at this example. Let's increase the bokeh amount right over here, and it pretty much does a good job. The most you can do here as far as focus control is concerned, it is depth correction. So basically just controls where the blur starts. So if you increase it to the right, the blur will start further away. If you take it to the left, the opposite will happen. The blur will start closer and closer. So for me, I'm going to take it a little to the right. However, there's no way to control where you want to focus. However, although not so precise, this can be done in Photoshop. So let's click right over here and see what happens. Now have a look at the results. Although it's not very precise, it's also blurring the sky. You can choose where to focus. Right now, the subject is blurred out and the background is in focus. So you can control where you want to focus with Photoshop, and this cannot be done in Luminar. Now you can of course get some areas back in focus by painting over that in Luminar, but that is completely different than working with depth to choose which areas are going to be in focus and which areas would not. So there you have it. Now let's move on to the next one where we look at additional background controls. With this example, let's start with Photoshop because this is one of the very few images where Photoshop performed great in our previous video where we talked about depth blur. Do check that out if you haven't yet after this video. Alright, let's apply depth blur. This time we're going to look at what additional controls we have apart from depth control like focal range, focal distance, or blur strength. Apart from that, what do we have and how do they perform? So have a look. The depth is pretty great. If we increase the haze, it's going to introduce haze in the background. And this can be pretty useful in separating the background from the subject. But if you have a look at the haze that Photoshop adds, it just isn't realistic. There are other better ways to add haze. It's just good for nothing. Now then we have warmth. Let's turn off haze. If you take it to the right, it's going to make the background warmer. If you take it to the left, it's going to make the background cooler. So let's make it warmer and see what happens. All right, so this is the warmth that it has added. Now, if you look at brightness and saturation, I don't know why they have added these sliders right over here, because it controls the overall brightness and the overall saturation. What is the point of even this? Just for adding that brightness, I have to send it to Photoshop's servers and then download it back? I mean, what the hell? We can do it with adjustment layers exponentially quickly. So if you have a look, it's increasing the overall brightness. And if you look at saturation, it will increase the overall saturation, and so much time just to increase saturation. There you go. Overall saturation. Now with Luminar, you have an additional control right here, which is highlights glow. If you increase it, it's going to add glow to the highlights. And the great part is you don't have to wait. I'm so frustrated with waiting. Anyway, so now look, see, it's instantaneous. There's a little lag, but that's understandable compared to Photoshop. So this is that, and it's done. Now, of course, you have warmth. So if you want to increase the warmth, now this warmth looks more usable. You can make it cooler if you want to, that's up to you. I'm going to make it slightly warm. Now then you have edge correction and depth correction. Now here, you don't have haze. So that's the one slider that Luminar needs. However, if you look at sky replacement, now in this image, there can be no sky replacement. But if you look at sky replacement, there is an option for haze. In this image, there is no sky, so we're going to look at some other image. So have a look at this photo. If we go to Sky AI, and let's select any of these skies. Now we can refine the selection later, but if you go to sky adjustments, you would notice that there is atmospheric haze. So if we increase it, it really helps make it a little more realistic. And then of course, this would be a little blurred because the background is blurred. So let's simply increase defocus. Now definitely this is not the sky for this photo, but if you increase the haze even more, it will just make it a little more usable. Also, the sky is a little dark, so increase the brightness of the sky. And there you have it, my friend. So just wanted to show you that there is atmospheric haze, but we really want to see it inside of Bokeh AI. Now let's talk about the advantage that Photoshop has and Luminar just does not. And it's very characteristic of Photoshop, and Luminar's not actually made for that. And that is, Photoshop gives you a lot of manual controls. It is a software where you can do anything. So you can bend the features, somehow make it work, and where it doesn't work, manually make those adjustments and make it work. But the possibilities are limitless. So in this case, let's say we just wanted to generate a depth map. We would go to Filter and then Neural Filters. Turn on Depth Map and just check Output Depth Map only. Also make sure that depth map resolution is set to high. Now as you can see, the depth map is created, but it's not very accurate, but still there are certain awesome things that we can do with it. Just hit OK for the moment. Now create a selection based on this depth map. Let's go to Channels, hold the controller command, click on the thumbnail of RGB. Now we have a selection according to the depth map. Now we can delete the depth map if you want to. Let's say you wanted to increase the contrast of the areas which are closer to the camera, right? So you would simply create a curves adjustment layer. And if you do anything right now, you would notice that the further away areas are being affected, because in the mask, the further away areas are brighter and the closer the areas, the darker it is. So we want just the opposite. So select the mask, press Ctrl or Command I. Have a look. It is the same depth map mask. And now you can just increase the contrast a little bit by creating a simple S. You can also use the hand if you want to. Select the hand and brighten this area a little bit, darken this area a little bit. So you can simply pinpoint which areas to darken and which areas to brighten. So a slight bit of contrast. Have a look. Here's the before, here's the after, just with the areas which are closer to the cameras to bring attention towards that. Now for the last feature, I have one complaint though for both the programs, and that is there is no noise slider. You see, whenever we add a background blur, we blur the background. And if originally there was some noise in the background, it would also be blurred. So with the subject, there would be noise, but for the background, there would be no noise. It would look absolutely unrealistic. Let me share with you what I mean. Have a look. This is the image that we just did, right? So if we zoom in, the background is blurred pretty nicely. But look at the noise. There is noise on the subject, but no noise in the background. Luminar, do something about this. Now do keep in mind when it comes to sky replacements, let's get back to this image again. In the sky adjustment settings, we do have a grain slider to match the noise of the new sky with the existing photo. However, we do not have that inside of Portrait Bokeh, unfortunately. I hope Luminar comes up with the slider soon. Luminar is not the only one here. Even Photoshop does not have that. Have a look. There's grain on the subject, but on the background, there is none. And there is no slider to adjust the grain or the noise. Even Photoshop has noise adjustment inside of Blur Gallery. So it could have added it here as well. In my opinion, Photoshop's step blur feature is still not ready to be used at all. It definitely needs some major improvements with future updates that hopefully don't turn out to be a headache. If you know, you know. However, with the industry standard manual controls of Photoshop, there are definitely a lot of possibilities, especially when you export the depth map. On the other hand, Luminar just is great and brilliant at getting the job done. It might not give you that much of a manual control, but it just gets the job done perfectly. As for me, I tend to use the best of both worlds. If you look at my previous tutorials, countless times I have used Luminar AI just to replace the sky because it is really great at matching the color of the sky with that of the image, adding mood and drama, so you can use that as a plugin or an accompaniment along with Photoshop where you have applied some manual adjustments. That's what I do. If you are interested to check out the brand new Luminar AI along with the brand new Bokeh AI, which is a part of Luminar AI, check the link in the description to get an additional discount. What I love about Luminar is that they just don't use AI as a marketing gimmick unlike many other software and plugins. I hope I could show you something new. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to give us a like and also don't forget to subscribe, and not just subscribe. Ring the bell so that you, my friend, don't miss any other future tips, tricks or tutorials. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so very much for your time. I'll see you again in my next one. Till then, stay tuned and make sure that you keep creating.